In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. We've heard that sentence our entire lives. It's the first line of the first book, the very foundation of everything we know. But what if that wasn't the beginning of everything? What if Genesis chapter 1 is not the start, but the restart, a restoration of something that came before? This is a journey into the silence before the first word, a look at the mysteries hidden between the lines of Scripture. The original Hebrew word used in Genesis is Bereshit. Most translations render this as in the beginning, but many Hebrew scholars point out a subtle, yet profound, difference. The grammar doesn't necessarily mean the absolute beginning of all things. A more literal translation could be, in a beginning. It implies a beginning, a specific starting point, but not necessarily the very first one. This simple linguistic detail cracks open an uncomfortable question. Why would the Bible, the book of origins, assume that something existed before the beginning it describes? What came before this beginning? The book of Job, one of the oldest books in the Bible, reveals something rarely discussed. In a profound passage, God asks Job, "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy?" The sons of God is a term often used to describe angels. This means that when God was laying the very foundations of our world, the angels were already there, watching, rejoicing, singing. This tells us that heaven existed before earth, and if angels existed before Genesis chapter 1, then so did events, histories, and dramas that we are never fully told about. The creation of earth wasn't the first act in the cosmic play. It was just the first act we were invited to see. Scripture tells us of a being called Lucifer. The name itself means light bringer. Isaiah describes him as the son of the morning. Ezekiel describes him as a guardian cherub, adorned with every precious stone, perfect in beauty, wisdom, and power. And then, fallen, cast down from the mountain of God. But here is the mystery that theologians have debated for centuries. Lucifer's fall happens before Adam and Eve ever sin in the Garden of Eden. The serpent that tempts them is already a fallen being. So where does this rebellion fit in the timeline? Did it happen in a forgotten era before Genesis? Or is it a story hidden between the lines, a silent prelude to the creation of humanity? The timeline suggests a great war, a cosmic betrayal that concluded before the first human ever took a breath. This leads us to a fascinating and controversial idea known as the gap theory. Genesis chapter 1, verse 2 says the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, the Hebrew phrase for formless. And void is tohu vabohu. What is interesting is that this exact phrase is almost never used in the Bible to describe an act of original creation. Instead, it's used to describe the aftermath of a great judgment, a divine destruction. For example, the prophet Jeremiah uses tohu vabohu to describe the desolation of a land judged by God. This has led some ancient scholars and modern theologians to believe there was a world before Adam's, a world perhaps ruled by Lucifer, which was then destroyed in a cosmic catastrophe, a divine judgment that left the planet formless and void. If this is true, then Genesis chapter 1 is not the story of creation from nothing, but the story of a grand restoration, a divine reset of a world already ancient and scarred. Strangely, this idea of a world before ours isn't confined to biblical interpretation. When we look at the oldest civilizations on Earth, we find a hauntingly similar memory. The Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Mayans, the Babylonians, cultures separated by vast oceans and thousands of years, all tell a similar story. They speak of a previous age, a golden era that ended in a cataclysmic destruction, a great flood, a fire from the sky, a reset. They often speak of knowledge passed down to them from beings they called gods, survivors of that previous world. How did all these ancient cultures, with no contact with one another, all remember the same fundamental event? It's as if humanity collectively carries a faint, dream-like memory of a world that was lost, a story that precedes our own. The mystery deepens when we re-examine the Garden of Eden. We typically think of it as a paradise created specifically for Adam and Eve, but the book of Ezekiel says something startling, speaking to the king of Tyre, but in a clear symbolic reference to Lucifer. God says, "You were in Eden, the garden of God." This verse suggests that Lucifer, the anointed cherub, walked in Eden before his fall, not Adam's Eden, but a primordial version. This raises the possibility that Eden was more than just a garden on earth. It may have been a realm, a nexus point, a place where the dimensions of heaven and earth overlapped. It wasn't just where humanity began. It was a cosmic center that existed long before us, a place of divine importance that became the stage for both angelic rebellion and human creation. So why doesn't the Bible just spell all of this out? Why the mystery? Why the silence? The Bible never explains everything. Not because it can't, but because it wasn't written to. The primary purpose of Genesis isn't to be a textbook on cosmology or angelic history. It's not about cosmic wars or lost worlds. It's about us. It's about human origins, human purpose, and humanity's relationship with its creator. Some truths are intentionally left hidden, veiled in mystery. As Deuteronomy says, the secret things belong to the Lord our God, but the things revealed belong to us and to our children forever. The Bible tells us what we need to know for our own story, not the entire story of the cosmos. So, when we look back before the first recorded moment, we can see the echoes. Before Genesis, there was intelligence. Before the creation of light, there was order. Before humanity, there was a heavenly society, and with it, rebellion. Genesis may not be the beginning of everything. It may be the beginning of us, our chapter in a much, much larger story that began in the silence before time, a story of restoration, of a second chance on a planet that may have already witnessed the rise and fall of powers we can barely imagine. The Bible does not shout these mysteries, it whispers them. In strange phrases, in forgotten verses, in the gaps between the lines. And sometimes the most powerful and profound truths aren't the ones that are plainly stated, but the ones hidden in the silence, waiting for us to ask the right questions. What if Genesis is not the start, but the aftermath? Thanks for watching. If these kinds of deep dives into ancient mysteries intrigue you, be sure to subscribe and follow for more.